This week's Parsha, Tazria, begins with the laws of ritual impurity and purity, Tuma and Tahara, as it relates to a woman giving birth. One of the interesting things about these laws is that a woman that has a baby girl is impure for double the amount of time as a woman that has a baby boy. Why is this? Is the Torah sexist? Is having a baby girl a dirtier thing in some way than having a baby boy? While I don't believe God or his Torah is sexist, it's clear that God designed men and women with very specific roles, and the Torah defines these roles. The Torah also makes very clear that these roles should not be mixed. As for example, there are quite a few laws of the Torah telling men and women not to dress in each other's clothing or styles, or perform activities traditionally associated with the opposite sex, such as men wearing cosmetics and women carrying weapons. So if the Torah is not sexist and does not see women as inferior to men, why are mothers impure for double the amount of time after giving birth to a baby girl? I think the answer to this lies in the story of creation. After Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they were cursed. Chava was cursed with a long and painful childbirthing process, along with being ruled by her husband. Adam was cursed with having to work hard for his food, as the Pasuk famously says, "By the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread, until he returns to the earth." Depressing stuff. And these curses basically defined humanity for thousands of years since that time. Women have been condemned to be dominated by men, mostly because of their inherent vulnerability and weakness while pregnant and nursing or raising young children. There was no way for them to survive independently. And men had to work very hard indeed to put food on the table for their families. Throughout history, and even in some parts of the world today, men would work like pack animals for 16 hours a day and at significant risk to their lives, and still not be able to provide more than basic subsistence for their families. This curse is the cause of all the misery in our world. Indeed, we lived in paradise before this curse took effect. And after it took effect, life became almost constant suffering, with small amounts of joy and happiness sprinkled in. I think the source of the impurity arising from childbirth is this curse. And if so, it makes sense for there to be a longer period of impurity for a baby girl over a baby boy, because the curse of a difficult birth process was a curse for all women, including the new baby girl. Interestingly, and not accidentally, now that we are in the end times, these curses are breaking down, at least in advanced first world cultures. Childbirth is no longer dangerous, and with various painkillers such as epidurals, in many ways not even super painful. And women are no longer viewed as weak or vulnerable, and no longer see men as necessary protectors. And on the man's side, the process of creating bread to eat has become mechanized and automated, requiring almost no physical labor to produce vast quantities of food. And work in general is perceived as almost unnecessary in a future with artificial intelligence and automation, to the point where certain political elements are talking about a universal basic income whereby all people are paid a set base amount without working at all. While these curses have to weaken and possibly even disappear in a messianic future, this does not mean that the Torah views the sexes as interchangeable. It's clear that even before the sin in the garden, that Adam and Chava were male and female and had different roles. Chava being more nurturing and a helper to Adam, and Adam working and protecting the garden. It's just that these roles were not defining of their whole physical reality in a way that it became after the sin. It was more spiritual, and they were more spiritual. They were not constantly focused on their physical survival as they were after the sin. But because these curses are weakening and will continue to weaken as the redemption draws even nearer, ever nearer, people now have choices that they never had before. They can embrace the spiritual and biblical nature of the differences between men and women, which Torah Jews believe is built into the very fabric of creation, male and female, masculine and feminine, two forces that go together and are both required for creation to exist. This was the case before the curse and will continue once the curse is no longer relevant. to Torah Jews. Or they can act as if there is no difference between men and women, rejecting the Torah view. This choice will be made by those that want to remove God and the Torah from their world, and they will seem like they're winning, at least in their own minds. But just because the physical and biological manifestations of these curses are weakening, this does not change the spiritual dimensions of the differences between the sexes. And ultimately, this anti-Torah and anti-God perspective will collapse because it is at odds with the full reality that God created. On a bigger picture, we live in dark and very ungodly times, and not just related to transsexual issues, where it seems the values of the Torah have disappeared from the world, where all politicians in all countries have been shown to be corrupt, power-hungry, sexually perverted, and in many cases with COVID policies such as lockdowns and mandated medical procedures, mass murderers, either deliberately or at least through incompetence and carelessness. But this is temporary, as all the forces of darkness and corruption that have ruled the world but have been hidden throughout the years are all now being exposed. In this process, it seems these powers are getting stronger, but the reality is the powerful have always been corrupt liars. The difference is now we see them clearly, and that is a step in the direction of eradicating these forces. May God send his anointed one soon to redeem us, and may we witness the final judgment of the hateful, power-hungry, corrupt ones, so we can see God's kingdom fulfilled on earth. Shabbat Shalom from Renana, Israel, my beautiful home. May you all join us here soon.